You gather here tonight with questions heavy in your soul, questions that do not come lightly, for they are born out of your deepest wound. You have asked me why the empath feels so much, why their sensitivity seems both a gift and a curse, why the flood of emotions belonging to others overwhelms them, and why it never feels as though the burden can be set down. You have come to believe that your empathy is a sign of light, of virtue, perhaps even a divine inheritance. And yes, there is truth in that. But tonight, I must speak a darker truth to you. Empathy, as you live it, may not be the luminous gift you imagine. It may in fact be your shadow crying out to be seen. I say this not to strip away your hope, but to deepen it. You see, the psyche is not a flat surface where light and shadow stand apart. It is a labyrinth where every beam of light casts a longer shadow, and every shadow hides the potential for a greater illumination. If you have the courage to descend with me now, you may begin to see that what you call sensitivity is not simply a noble ability to feel others, but is often your own unconscious crying through the borrowed voices of the world. You believe you are feeling others' pain, but what if I told you that beneath the surface, it is your own unlived suffering that you encounter, mirrored in their faces, disguised in their tears? Consider this. The empath often says, I can feel what you feel as if it were my own. And yet, how does this miracle occur? You cannot literally enter another's bloodstream. You cannot crawl into the private cavern of their nervous system. What you are truly encountering is resonance. Their expression awakens something long asleep in you, a word, a tone of voice, a flicker of fear in their eye touches the wound in your unconscious, and suddenly you feel with an intensity that seems alien. Foreign, invasive, you believe it is theirs, yet the intensity belongs to you. That is why it overwhelms you. That is why you cannot simply let it go. You are not carrying only their pain, you are carrying the unacknowledged cry of your shadow. The shadow, my friends, is not a monster in the basement as many imagine. It is the orphan child you abandoned when you learned it was too dangerous to feel fully, too risky to express, too shameful to live as you were. The empath is born not because the world needs another saint of compassion, but because in their childhood they were forced to become a sentinel of atmosphere. In a volatile household, in a fragmented environment, they learned to read the room before they could even speak. To survive, they sharpened their senses to detect the slightest tremor of danger, the faintest vibration of tension. And so sensitivity became armor. Empathy became a weapon of survival. They tuned themselves not to their own needs, but to the moods of others. In this way, their shadow, their unacknowledged rage, grief, loneliness was buried, while their conscious personality became the one who feels for others. Thus the empath is created not from light alone, but from abandonment, from the unspoken contract. If I can anticipate your needs, if I can feel your pain, maybe you will not harm me, maybe you will love me, and And so what you call sensitivity is really a haunting. It is the shadow's cry, still echoing from the chambers of childhood. The empath does not yet know this, so they believe themselves cursed to feel what is not theirs. But let me whisper this secret. It is yours. It has always been yours. The pain you attribute to others is the reflection of your own unconscious wound. That is why you cannot close the door on it. That is why their suffering feels like home. The unconscious recognizes itself in another's torment and seizes it, desperately hoping you will finally turn and see your own forgotten face. Think of the dream where a stranger appears, weeping, and you rush to comfort them, but when you lift their veil, you see your own face staring back at you, aged by sorrow. This is the archetypal image of the empath, running towards the world's pain only to be met by their own reflection. What feels like holy service is often an evasion of the deeper work, the confrontation with your own shadow, the willingness to listen to your own cry instead of chasing it endlessly in others. Why is this truth dark? Because it strips you of the illusion that your empathy alone will save you. It demands that you turn inward, that you betray the false nobility of being everyone's healer, and dare to acknowledge that your gift arose from your wound. Sensitivity is not only the halo you think it is the scar tissue of the psyche, grown sharp because you had no choice. You are not condemned, but you are not free either until you recognize this. Until then, you will be enslaved to every atmosphere, drained by every sorrow, seduced into believing you exist only to absorb. You see, the archetype of the wounded healer lies here. Chiron, the centaur, pierced by a poison he could never heal, wandered the earth, teaching medicine, divining herbs, offering cures to others, but his own wound remained. His wisdom was vast, his service unmatched, but his suffering unhealed. This is the empath's tragedy. You heal others because you cannot bear to face your own mortal wound. You pour out so that you do not have to look inward, and yet, paradoxically, your healing power comes only from the depths of that very wound. This is why you cannot ignore it. This is why you must descend. If I tell you this in such grave tones, it is because the unconscious does not forgive ignorance forever. What is ignored returns, often with greater force. The shadow, if denied, does not dissolve. It becomes projection, and projection is the great trickster of the psyche. You think you are feeling the other's emotions, but you are projecting your own. Their sadness is your sadness. Their anger is your anger. Their helplessness is your helplessness. This is why empaths so often fall into destructive relationships. They are drawn not to those who are truly other, but to those who carry the mirror of their own abandoned self. And so they find themselves with partners who wound them, friends who drain them, environments that strip them, all because they unconsciously seek the external form of their own shadow. It is the psyche's desperate attempt to bring you back to yourself. But if you remain asleep, you will believe You are cursed by sensitivity rather than invited to healing. I tell you, the time has come to listen differently. Do not ask, what are they feeling? Ask instead, what in me is awakened by their expression? Do not rush to heal their wound. Pause and ask, whose cry is this really? You will find that beneath the layers, it is your own, and this recognition is not selfishness. It is the beginning of individuation. For individuation is not the art of saving the world, but of becoming whole. And wholeness cannot occur while you remain split, while your empathy serves others, but betrays your shadow. Yes, the world is in pain. Yes, others suffer. But you cannot heal the world by carrying its burden as if it were yours. You will drown. You can only heal the world by integrating your own shadow, by becoming whole, by allowing the sensitivity that was once a cry for survival to become the grounded perception of one who has faced their own darkness and emerged alive. Then your empathy becomes true compassion, no longer a projection, but a conscious choice. No longer compulsive, but free. Then you do not absorb, you witness, you do not drown, you guide, you do not confuse yourself with the other, you stand beside them with clarity. Let us go deeper. The empath sensitivity is not only psychological, but archetypal. It is tied to the ancient motif of the medium, the oracle, the priestess who feels the vibrations of the unseen. In every culture, there were those chosen to carry the collective unconscious, to sense the tremors of what others could not. The empath carries a fragment of this archetype, but when it is distorted by personal shadow, it becomes torment rather than gift. The oracle, if unconscious, is simply possessed. The empath, if unconscious, is simply drained. Only when the shadow is faced can the archetype shine as intended. Then the empath becomes a seer, one who feels not because they are wounded, but because they are awake. If you listen closely to the murmur of your own heart, you will notice that your sensitivity is never neutral. It comes with a weight, a trembling, a subtle fear. You do not simply observe another's sadness as one might observe the falling of rain. You absorb it like a sponge, trembling as if it might drown you. This is not objective compassion. This is the shadow's pull. It is the unconscious saying, this pain is already within you. Do not look away. But because the conscious ego resists, you believe the flood is coming from outside. The world becomes heavy with emotion because your own depths remain uncharted. You are, in truth, haunted by your own ocean, and every other becomes a shoreline where your tides crash. This is why the empath often feels exhausted. To feel another's pain should not consume your life force. If it does, it is not theirs you are carrying, but yours. It is as if you are walking with a mirror strapped to your chest. Everywhere you go, you see yourself reflected in others, and you do not realize it. The mirror is unconscious, hidden, and so you assume you are flooded by the world, but the truth is more radical. You are flooded by yourself, and the world only triggers what was already waiting. The unconscious uses projection as its most faithful servant. Imagine a dream where you meet a stranger screaming in agony. You awaken shaken, believing the dream belongs to another. But in analysis, you soon realize that every character in the dream is you. The stranger's scream is your scream. The same is true in waking life. That woman weeping in the cafe, that friend raging in despair, that child trembling in fear, they are not merely themselves. They are actors cast by your unconscious to perform your hidden script. The empath believes they are attending the theater of the world, but they are sitting in their own private cinema, watching a projection of their shadow upon the screen of life. This is why it feels so unbearably personal, because it is, and yet this is not a condemnation, but an invitation. If your sensitivity is your shadow's cry, then your task is not to deny it, but to finally listen when you feel the heaviness of another. Ask, what is this saying about me? What part of my soul has been silenced, suffocated, denied, so that it must now speak through the mouths of others? This is the radical turn inward. This is the essence of individuation, to own the projections, to reclaim the cries, to realize that what you thought was foreign is homecoming. The empath must evolve from unconscious medium to conscious integrator. Only then can their gift transform from survival strategy into sacred presence. I must warn you, this path is perilous. For the moment you begin to withdraw your projections, the moment you say, this pain is mine, the ego will recoil in horror. It will scream, but I am good because I heal others. I am noble because I feel their pain. If I admit this is mine, then I am selfish, broken, unworthy. Here lies the greatest temptation of the empath, to remain the savior rather than face the sinner within. But hear me clearly, the sinner is no monster. The sinner is your wounded child. The sinner is your unlived truth. To face your shadow is not to become evil, but to retrieve your innocence. Empathy for others is only the beginning. Empathy for your own shadow is a true initiation. Think of the archetype of Christ on the cross. The empath identifies with the crucifixion. I carry the pain of the world. I bleed for others. I sacrifice myself for their redemption. But what the empath forgets is the resurrection. The crucifixion without resurrection is endless martyrdom, endless suffering. The shadow's cry is precisely this: do not remain nailed forever to the world's agony. Yes, die to your illusions. Die to your projections, but rise as well. Rise whole, no longer bound to compulsive sensitivity, no longer defined by what you absorb, but by what you are. Resurrection is individuation. And until the empath confronts their shadow, they remain crucified without hope of dawn. Let me draw you further into the dream world. For the unconscious always speaks most clearly in images. A young woman dreams she is walking through a dark forest. She hears children crying. She rushes to them, only to find they are faceless. She picks one up, holds it close, feels its trembling heart, but when she looks into its blank face, suddenly it shifts, and it is her own childhood face, staring back. She awakens in tears. This is the empath's dream. They believe they are rescuing the faceless suffering of the world, but in truth, it is their own abandoned self they cradle. The faceless child is the shadow stripped of identity, hidden from memory, yet crying ceaselessly until it is embraced. Every time you feel another's sorrow, it is this dream reenacted. You are carrying your own faceless child. Now, you may ask, does this mean empathy is false? That it is all illusion, all projection? No. But it means that until you individuate, your empathy is entangled. True compassion arises not from unconscious resonance, but from conscious wholeness. When you have faced your own suffering, you no longer confuse yourself with others. You can feel them without drowning. You can listen without absorbing. You can stand in the storm without being swept away. This is not the compulsive empathy of the shadow's cry, but the luminous compassion of the integrated soul. The difference is immense. One drains you, the other empowers you. One enslaves you, the other liberates you. One is born of fear, the other of freedom. The empath's sensitivity, if integrated, becomes vision. It is no longer a desperate radar scanning for danger, but a subtle perception of archetypal patterns, of collective movements, of the hidden language of the psyche. You cease being a sponge and become a mirror clear, still reflecting the truth without distortion. Then, and only then, does empathy fulfill its higher archetypal role, to guide humanity through the labyrinths of the unconscious, to sense what is invisible to the ordinary eye, to translate the shadow into meaning. But this higher calling is unreachable without descent. You cannot skip the underworld. You cannot bypass your own shadow and still expect to hold the collective shadow without collapse. That is why so many empaths are overwhelmed. They want to be seers without being seekers, healers without being healed. And so I call you not to abandon your sensitivity, but to purify it, to face the dark truth. It is your shadow crying. Do not silence it by drowning in others. Do not inflate it into sainthood. Sit with it. Let it tell you of your childhood wound, of the nights you trembled in silence, of the moments you were unseen, unheard, unloved. Let the cry pierce you until you recognize it as your own, then embrace it, not as enemy, but as forgotten kin. Integration is not conquest, it is reconciliation. The shadow does not vanish when you face it. It becomes part of you, enriching your soul with depth, grounding your sensitivity in truth. Then, what once was a cry becomes a song. What once was torment becomes guidance. There is a rhythm to the psyche, a wave of descent and ascent, of crucifixion and resurrection, of cry and song. If you resist the descent, you remain forever in the cry. If you accept it, you emerge into the song. The empath's path is not to remain forever wounded, but to transform the wound into wisdom. This is alchemy. The base metal of unconscious sensitivity is transmuted into the gold of conscious compassion. But the fire that achieves this is the fire of confrontation with the shadow. Without fire, there is no gold. Listen, then, to your body. It knows what your mind resists. When you feel drained, heavy, overwhelmed, ask not what is wrong with the other, but what is unresolved in you. When you weep for the world, ask whose tears these truly are. When you cannot breathe under the weight of another's sorrow, ask what suffocation from your own past still grips your chest. This is the sacred reversal, the turning of the gaze inward, not to abandon the world, but to meet it from wholeness. The empath who has faced their shadow is no longer prey to projection. They become, instead, a living bridge between light and dark, conscious and unconscious, self and other. They no longer cry unconsciously, they speak consciously, and the world listens. Do not imagine that the shadow is silent when you ignore it. On the contrary, its cry grows louder the more it is denied. It calls not with words, but through symptoms, through exhaustion, through anxiety, through a nervous system that trembles like a frightened animal. The empath often believes they are cursed with frailty, that their sensitivity is a flaw in their biology. But what if the trembling is not weakness at all, but the body speaking the truth the mind refuses to hear? Every migraine, every sleepless night, every chest that feels too tight in crowded rooms is the shadow's whisper. Look at me. I am still here. You cover this cry with the noble cloak of empathy, saying you suffer because others suffer. But no, you suffer because you have not yet dared to embrace the one who cries inside you. The psyche is like a great house with countless rooms and cellars. You have locked away the shadow in one of these basements, believing it too dangerous to let out. Yet at night you hear the knocking, the scratching, the muffled sobs from beneath the floorboards. And when you meet another who suffers, you think it is their knocking. You hear, but in truth, it is your own. The empath is like the keeper of a haunted house, hearing ghosts in every hallway, but never realizing they are the ghosts of their own family. Long buried, you wander from room to room, chasing apparitions, while the key to the basement hangs from your own belt, unused. And so the path requires courage, the courage to descend into that basement. Do not mistake me. This descent is terrifying. It is to enter the darkness where your oldest memories dwell, where the wound of abandonment still bleeds, where the rage you were forbidden to express still burns. It is to face the parts of you that once ensured your survival by being silenced. Yet until you open this door, you will forever be haunted. You will forever confuse your shadow's cry with the world's suffering, and you will live enslaved to atmospheres, to moods, to the endless tides of emotion that seem to come from without, but in truth rise from within. But let me reassure you, once you enter the basement, you will discover that the monster you feared is not a monster at all. It is your own child self, crouched in the dark, waiting for your return. It is your rage that was never allowed to speak. It is your grief that was told to stay silent. It is your terror that no one came to soothe. They are not here to harm you, they are here to be reclaimed. Integration does not mean destroying the shadow, it means bringing that child up the stairs, into the light, letting them sit at the table of your soul. Only then does the haunting end. Only then does the empath's cry transform into the empath's gift. I have said before that the empath without integration is a martyr, crucified on the world's emotions, but the empath with integration becomes a mystic. The mystic does not drown in the collective unconscious. They navigate it. They have faced their own depths, so they do not mistake the collective's pain for their personal fate. They carry sensitivity not as a wound, but as an instrument. They can tune into the archetypal field without losing themselves. This is the true calling hidden in the empath's torment, to evolve from shadow bearer to archetype bearer, from compulsive absorber to conscious mediator. The dark truth is the beginning, the luminous truth is the destination. But there is another danger here, one that must be spoken. The empath who does not face their shadow often falls into a secret inflation. They begin to believe their suffering is proof of superiority. I feel more deeply than others. Therefore, I am more spiritual, more noble. This is the hidden pride of the unconscious empath. Yet this too is shadow in disguise. For what is this claim of superiority but another way to avoid the wound? If I make my sensitivity into a crown, I do not have to admit it was born from my scars, but such crowns are fragile. They crack the moment the world overwhelms you, and you fall again into despair. Better to strip the crown from your head and kneel before the shadow honestly. Only then does true nobility arise, not the nobility of pride, but the nobility of wholeness archetypally. This journey is the descent into the underworld. In myths, the hero must descend into Hades, into hell, into the land of shadows, to retrieve what was lost. Orpheus descend for Eurydice, Inanna for her sister, Christ for the souls of the dead. The empath too must descend not into mythic caverns, but into their own unconscious. Their Eurydice is the abandoned self. Their treasure is their shadow's cry, and the rule is the same as in myth. You cannot look away. Orpheus failed because he doubted and looked back. The empath fails when they turn their gaze outward too soon, chasing others' pain instead of holding steady with their own. You must look at your shadow directly, without flinching, without escape. Only then does the ascent become possible. Do not fear that this will make you selfish. On the contrary, it will make you truly compassionate. For only when you have embraced your own shadow can you stand beside another without projection. Only then can you say, I see you, without secretly saying, I see myself in you. Only then can you give without depletion, love without fear, listen without drowning. This is the paradox. By turning inward, you become more capable of turning outward. By claiming your own cry, you become more capable of answering the cries of others. The shadow does not separate you from the world, it connects you to it, but only if you face it consciously. Imagine the empath after integration. They walk into a room heavy with unspoken tension. Before, they would have absorbed it unconsciously, carried it like poison in their bloodstream. No, they feel it, yes, but they remain centered. They recognize this tension is in the room, but my body is calm. They can choose to speak, to guide, to name the unspoken. Without drowning in it, they become a vessel for awareness rather than a sponge for pain. Others feel safe around them, not because they absorb everything, but because they radiate presence. This is the difference between unconscious empathy and conscious compassion. The first consumes you, the second emanates from you. The shadow, once faced, becomes your ally. The very wound that once haunted you becomes the well from which you draw depth. You no longer fear the cry, for you recognize it as your own voice, calling you deeper, and in answering it, you discover something extraordinary. Your sensitivity was never meant to be torment. It was meant to be vision. The empath's destiny is not to bleed endlessly for others, but to see into the depths of the soul, to perceive what is hidden, to name what is unspoken. But you cannot fulfill this destiny until you answer the shadow's cry. So I ask you now, as if we were alone in the silence of your soul, can you hear it? That faint weeping in the background, that ache you always attribute to others, can you recognize it as yours? Do not run, do not numb. Listen, let it pierce you, let it break you open. For in that breaking, you will discover the door to wholeness. This is not a call for sentimentality, but for courage. To be an empath is not to be forever wounded. To be an empath is to be called into the deepest confrontation with the self. Only there does the true transformation begin. There is a silence that comes after the cry. If you have ever truly listened to your own shadow, you will know it. At first there is weeping, rage, trembling, all the unspoken emotions rising like a storm. But then, when you neither resist nor project, when you finally sit with them as you would with a long-lost friend, something shifts. The shadow, once seen, ceases to scream. It does not vanish, but its cry softens into a presence. It becomes a companion instead of a ghost. And in that silence, a new strength is born. This strength is not the brittle armor of survival, nor the inflated pride of being special. It is a grounded power, the quiet authority of one who has faced themselves. This is what I call the dignity of wholeness. When the empath reaches this point, they discover that sensitivity is not an open wound, but a refined instrument. It is like a harp that no longer vibrates chaotically with every passing wind, but plays only when touched with intention. Before, every whisper from the world would strike their strings, and they could not stop the music. No, they hold the harp in their own hands. They choose when to play, when to rest, when to offer the song of compassion. Sensitivity becomes art rather than torment. It is no longer survival, it is creation. But you may ask, what of love? What of the empath's longing to be connected, to be needed, to be embraced for their gift? Here lies another shadow truth. Much of what the empath calls love is a disguised hunger. It is the shadow seeking recognition through others. You feel alive when you are needed, because deep inside, your abandoned self still pleads, see me, hold me, need me. So you attach yourself to those in pain, mistaking their dependence for intimacy. You confuse being drained with being loved. You call your suffering loyalty, your sacrifice devotion. But true love is not built on hunger. True love emerges only when you no longer need to be needed. Only when you have embraced the one within you who was unloved can you love another without chains. This is why so many empaths are entangled with narcissists, addicts, broken souls who take without giving. The empath believes they are saving them, but in truth, they are reenacting the old wound, trying once again to earn love by carrying another's burden. The shadow cries, maybe this time, if I carry enough, I will be chosen. And so the cycle repeats until the empath awakens. The awakening is bitter at first. It means realizing that what you called love was often a shadow's cry for recognition. But if you endure this bitterness, it transforms into clarity. Then you can finally see the difference between true connection and shadow-driven attachment. You can finally walk away from those who drain you, not in anger, but in peace. Because you no longer confuse their need with your worth. In dreams, this transformation often appears as an image of separation. A patient once dreamed she was carrying a wounded man on her back through a desolate desert. She staggered under his weight, bleeding from her own feet. Yet she would not let him go. At last she reached a river. On the far side was a forest, green and alive. She felt she must cross, but the weight of the man made her sink in terror. She realized she would drown. Then a voice spoke from the water, "Release him, or both of you will die." She hesitated, weeping, for she believed his life depended on her. But finally, with trembling hands, she let him slide into the water. To her astonishment, he did not drown. He stood whole and strong and walked into the forest. Without her, she followed, free of his weight. Her feet healed. This is the empath's initiation, to release the false savior role, to trust that others can walk their own path, to cross into life unburdened. Only then does the empath become whole, archetypally. This is the initiation of the healer. The wounded healer must first separate from the compulsion to heal everyone else. Only when they accept that their shadow was the source of their sensitivity can they rise into true service. Then they no longer heal out of hunger, but out of fullness. They no longer bleed for others, but offer their wisdom as medicine. They become, in essence, alchemists. They transform their own lead into gold, and in doing so, they show others that such transformation is possible. They do not carry others, they guide them to carry themselves. This is the difference between projection and individuation, between compulsion and freedom. The empath's shadow cry, when unheeded, is a curse, but when embraced, it becomes a compass. It points the way to your deepest wound, and therefore to your deepest healing. The very sensitivity that once drained you becomes your bridge to the collective unconscious. You no longer confuse yourself with the other, but you can enter their depths and return carrying insight. This is why the world needs empaths, but not unconscious ones. The world needs those who have faced their own shadow, who can stand in the fire without being consumed, who can feel without drowning. Only then does empathy become wisdom. Only then does the empath fulfill their archetypal destiny. And so I tell you, do not run from the darkness of your sensitivity. Do not idolize it, and do not despise it. Listen to it. It is the cry of your shadow, calling you home. If you follow it, if you dare to descend, you will discover that the cry was never meant to torment you. It was meant to awaken you to the parts of yourself you abandoned, to awaken you to the wholeness waiting beneath the wound. When that awakening comes, your sensitivity will no longer feel like a curse. It will feel like a vision, a way of seeing the invisible, a way of carrying light into shadow. Then you will no longer say, I feel too much. You will say, I see what others do not. The dark truth is not the end, it is the threshold. The empath who crosses it emerges not as a martyr but as a guide, not as a victim but as a mystic. This is your task, and it is sacred. Your sensitivity is not brokenness, it is potential, but only if you hear the cry for what it is, your shadow's voice, only if you embrace it fully, without projection, without fear. Then the cry becomes song, then the darkness becomes light.